Melaka, one of Malaysia's top drawer tourist destinations on the coast, where a variety of cultures meet. The British were the latest Europeans to occupy Melaka from the 1820s onward. Before that, the Dutch. The Dutch were here about 180 years, and they made a lasting architectural impact on Melaka, leaving behind the State House, governor's residence, and the church, where the people of Melaka could praise Jesus Christo, Protestant style. Even though the Dutch were in Malaysia for almost 200 years, their colonial days here were always numbered. No one in Asia really appreciated the tulips, the stinky Dutch foods, or the ugly Dutch language. So when the British showed up at the end of the 18th century, it was, "Get out, Dutch, you're not wanted." And the British gladly moved in, took control, and let the Dutch maintain their colonial positions while they edged them out eventually. British built this mini railway around 1835 expressly for the Dutch. Get on, get out, stay out. If you want to come back with a visa, and come back as a tourist. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to set their asses down in Melaka. The Portuguese took this place over in 1511, but the Dutch kicked their hindies in 1641. The Portuguese were adios muchachos. However, in the 80s, they built a Portuguese settlement here to commemorate the Portuguese influence on Melaka. There's not much left of the Eurasian community in Melaka. Most of the Portuguese either moved away or they intermarried away. So barely anybody speaks the language. And it's not Portuguese. It's Cristão, which is about 45% Malay grammar, 35% Portuguese words, and 20 to 25% obscenities borrowed from other languages. The Portuguese's lasting influence on Melaka and the Eurasian community that exists today is Catholicism. Oh, they spread it, and they spread it far and wide. And their descendants practice it religiously to this day. They celebrate Christmas, they don't wear condoms, and honor the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. After the Dutch kicked the asses of the Portuguese and told them, bye-bye, bye-bye, they allowed the Portuguese to leave this small segment of the former Portuguese fortress, now called A Famosa, behind, as a slight remembrance that the Portuguese were once here. You can bet the Dutch love Melaka so much that they built a fort to defend it. They didn't want any other European or Asian getting a piece of this trading empire, and of the Dutch delights that they were manufacturing with cheap Asian labor. So they built this fortress with cannons to protect their territory. The Portuguese built a wall on the fortress first, but when the Dutch took over, they wanted to tell any and all, get out, stay out. So the Dutch built multi-layered walls as a message to anyone who wanted to get a piece of their precious Melaka. This is a very symbolic place in Melaka. On the top of the hill is a Dutch church, St. Paul's Church, intentionally built where the Portuguese fortress used to lie. And then when the British took over, they built a Dutch graveyard as if to say, you're dead, Holland, we got Malaysia now. The Brits were always better suited to run Melaka than the Portuguese or the Dutch. Secretly, the British love Islam, and they were more than happy to construct this building around the 1850s, which now functions as an Islamic museum, so that Brits can really convert to Islam quickly, cheaply, and efficiently the second they arrive in Malaysia. A great treat about Melaka, in fact, about all of Malaysia, is that there's a prayer room never more than 5 minutes away. I can always pray to Allah whenever I want. The Indians are part of the fabric of Malaysia and also part of the fabric of Melaka, mostly Tamils. Now, going back about 300 years ago, the Indian traders mixed with the Malay women, who didn't sleep with the Malay women, to combine and create a new culture, the Chetties, with their own cuisine, their own values, and their own jokes. Now, most of the Indians that came to Malaysia were initially Hindus, brought over by the British to work on the tea plantations. But later, as word got back to India that Malaysia had a swinging culture, the Muslims of India wanted a piece, and they came over as well. And they built their own mosques, but with Hindu influences. And let us not forget the Chinese mix into the equation. The Chinese were here almost from the very beginning and have mixed with every other group, including the Malays, to create the Straits Chinese community, the Baba Nanyas, who have created their own Karnataka cuisine. One of the latest entrants into Melaka is the Korean community. They couldn't be left out. When they found out the Portuguese were here, the English were here, the Dutch were here, the Malays, the Chetties, you name it, the Koreans had to get a piece too. And they've come over, I wouldn't say exactly in droves, but they've come over to set up chapchae and bulgogi houses. You can imagine with such a plethora of cultures in Melaka that there's great competition to see which culture emerges on top. Now the Chinese are the most aggressive. They try to build everywhere. You see a Hindu temple sprouting up, well you can imagine that the Chinese are going to be right next door. You see a Chetty restaurant, you can be sure that the Chinese are going to have a restaurant alongside it. As an example, one mosque gets trumped by 3 Chinese temples.